When Penelope peed on that stick and saw two bright pink lines, she freaked out. She was only 17, fresh out of high school, with dreams of studying design at university. Her boyfriend, Connor, a few years older, tried to calm her down and assured her they'd make it work. And they did. Penelope pursued her studies while Connor stepped up as a dad, helping with everything he could. They didn't waste any time on a big fancy wedding either. Instead, they quietly signed those marriage papers and celebrated with Penelope's parents at a cozy cafe. But somehow, it all felt surreal to both of them. One afternoon, Julian made his way to Penelope's desk during the workday, striking up a conversation. They usually didn't interact much at work, keeping their exchanges to a simple hi and bye. Penelope felt like a schoolgirl again. Her face flamed red as they chatted. She giggled nervously at his jokes and couldn't muster the courage to meet his gaze. Gradually, gifts began to show up on her desk. These gestures struck Penelope as incredibly endearing. Secretly, she always longed for her stoic and reserved husband to be this way, but he hadn't been like that even in the early days of their marriage. Now, after all these years, Penelope had stopped hoping for such things. One time, during an after-hours office celebration for a colleague's birthday, both departments ended up quite tipsy. By the time Julian approached Penelope, she was on her fifth drink. Initially, he tried to strike up a conversation, but then he asked her to dance. While they were swaying to the music, he leaned in and started whispering various raunchy things in her ear. Penelope's cheeks burned, both from the alcohol and from Julian's words. When he tugged her toward the back room, she didn't resist. The truth was, she longed to be alone with him. Their office romance took off from there. Soon, colleagues were murmuring behind their backs, throwing judgmental glances at Penelope. Julian enjoyed his freedom, yet she was tied down by familial bonds, a fact well known to all. It was true, nobody had actually caught her and Penelope red-handed, but the whisperings among their peers hinted that they were aware of the ongoing affair. Once the whispers reached the boss's ears, he summoned the accused to his office for a formal questioning. Overwhelmed by guilt, she admitted to her indiscretion and pleaded for discretion, promising to sever ties with her paramour. Subsequently, she tormented herself with remorse, questioning her rationale for risking her marriage so blatantly, especially near her husband's old school friend. Nonetheless, what was done could not be undone. Regardless, the liaison between her and Julian persisted unchecked. She found herself spending increasingly more time with him, either after hours or during lunch breaks. Their secret meetings at a modest hotel close by became frequent escapes. The affair deepened, ensnaring her like quicksand. Sebastian, their boss, held strict views on workplace affairs. He did not hesitate to remove such obstacles, sometimes firing those who participated in them. Penelope did not suspect that Sebastian's contempt for office affairs stemmed from a personal wound. His first wife left him for another man, leaving him with a deep-rooted resentment of unfaithful partners. Penelope's actions reflected the betrayal of his ex-wife, exacerbating Sebastian's internal conflicts. He struggled with his emotions, wondering if he should get involved in this family mess that didn't concern him. The bitterness of betrayal from the woman who was dear to him and with whom he spent his whole life was replaced by shock and seething anger. At that moment, all he craved was to hit that very colleague, Julian, whom Penelope was dating on the side. To let off steam, he went out into the corridor and began furiously pounding on the wall with his fists until ominous traces of his blood appeared on it. The shadow of his emotional agony lessened, and the physical pain took over. Returning to a modest home, Penelope, her husband and daughter were already in the land of dreams. Realizing that his daughter had an important day at art school the next morning, he attacked Penelope in a low voice. She, in turn, blamed him in a whisper for the current situation. She stood her ground, explaining her flirtation with Julian by saying that Connor was acting cold and distant. This was a heavy blow for Connor, who had not expected such harsh accusations. He offered Penelope everything he could, but it didn't seem to be enough to satisfy her. That night they went to different rooms, and in the gloomy morning silence, each went to his workplace. All day long, the man thought about his predicament and what his next steps should be. However, Penelope anticipated any decision he made. She called him to inform him of her decision to move in with her lover, believing that this was the best solution for both. Connor had no choice but to agree. The decision not to accompany her mother to the stranger's house was solely his daughter's decision, which Penelope did not dispute. Inspired by her newfound freedom and youth, she was eager to spend every free minute with Julian, and did not want their daughter to overshadow her happiness. When Penelope moved in with Julian, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. Although she enjoyed the newfound attention and excitement, deep down she couldn't shake the guilt of abandoning her family. Julian, however, seemed unperturbed by this change. He accepted her into his life with open arms and a carefree attitude that both calmed and disturbed him. Connor, on the other hand, faced a deep sense of betrayal and loss. The apartment, which had once been filled with the laughter and chatter of his family, was now eerily silent. His daughter, feeling her father's grief, tried to be strong and support him, but the absence of her mother weighed heavily on both of them. Despite all the upheavals, life went on. Connor threw himself into his work, using it as a way to distract himself from the pain. His daughter, despite her broken heart, focused on her work, pouring out her emotions on the canvas. They created a new daily routine that included frequent walks, going to the cinema, and eating together, trying to find a semblance of normality in the midst of this chaos. Meanwhile, Penelope's life with Julian was full of passionate nights and spontaneous adventures. On weekends, they traveled to nearby cities, dined at trendy restaurants, and enjoyed the luxury that Penelope could only dream of before. One afternoon, Sebastian called Penelope to his office. She walked in with her heart pounding, not knowing what to expect. He looked at her with a mixture of disappointment and understanding. "Penelope, I've been monitoring the situation for some time now. Obviously, your relationship with Julian affects the workplace environment." Penelope nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I know, Sebastian. I'm truly sorry for interrupting." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I understand that personal matters can be difficult, but this cannot continue to affect our professional environment. I give you a choice. Either stop this case and keep your professionalism, or one of you will have to leave the company." Tears welled up in Penelope's eyes. She knew this moment would come, but it didn't make it any easier. She thanked Sebastian and left his office, thoughts and emotions bubbling in her head. The weeks turned into months, and the tension in their relationship became noticeable. Julian's carefree demeanor began to seem shallow, and Penelope missed the depth of connection she and Connor once had. Despite Julian's best efforts to keep their relationship afloat, Penelope's heart no longer lay with him.